Okay, hello ghouls. It is Spooky Dolly to Chris again. I'm going to do the second half of this tutorial. Um, and this time I have a couple of hand-drawn tattoos that I'm going to be painting over. Um, so to start with, I have one that I have just very, very lightly sketched out with my watercolor pencil. And I always use my really cheap watercolor pencils to do the initial sketch because they they go on the lightest, they're the least pigmented, which means they're the easiest to get rid of and erase mistakes. And I just use my little, here we go, my Tombow Mono Zero eraser. It's a little bitty, small, precise tip so I can erase nice and neatly. Okay, so just to make that a little easier to see, I'm going to go over it with a Prismacolor pencil. Oh, well, this pencil's so short you can't see, but you'll just have to take my word for it that it's a Prismacolor pencil. Because the Prismacolor is a nice pigmented ink, and it will put down a good line that you can see clearly and that will not erase with water, so that when you start painting, you don't have to worry about accidentally erasing. Until you want to erase anyway. um, so I'm just gonna kind of go over this a little bit, and I've already done that for the other ones that I'm going to be painting over. I just wanted to have one that was basically ready to go from scratch, pretty much. All right, now where I got a little bit wonky on that line, just take that eraser, and because it's a polymer eraser, it will erase Prismacolor. So now I have that on there much easier to see, which is going to make it easier for me to paint, especially because it is rapidly getting dark in this room. I don't know why I always decide to film these as it starts to get dark, but that's just when I was ready. Okay, so I'm going to grab, let's see, where is my round brush first? I'm going to go in with my little Artist Loft Roma brushes. These are my absolute favorite because they are short-handled and they have like the grippy kind of a rubber finish to them. So I'm going to go in with these and just do the fills first because it actually makes the line work easier to do if the fill is already finished. So actually I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet. Not super wet, but I don't want it to be totally dry either, because I want this to go on in as thin of a layer as possible in order to avoid brush strokes. So really the first coat should just barely give you like a hint of color. And because my camera sucks, it's going to be a little hard to show, especially with these pastel colors. So I may just have to paint this and then come back and show it. All right. So see how it's not really even, but you also don't really see textured brush strokes. That's what you want. So I'm going to set that aside and let it dry for just a second while I do the other one. And then I'm going to add another coat on top and just keep building up on these until I have the color that I want. And my purple, unfortunately, is super thick, so I'm just going to be adding some water to this really quick before I even start painting. I actually only have a very small amount of this purple left, and I've kind of been putting off making more because I really would like to get myself a nice little swatch of it on some white paper before I do. Because this particular lavender and mint are actually custom blended to match my business colors exactly. So I am going to need to mix up another batch. I can't just go out and buy the perfect color. Okay, so same deal here. You can't see any real texture with that, but it's not fully coated, so, or fully saturated rather. So I'm going to do a couple of coats on these. The black is going to go a lot faster, both because the black paint is much thinner and also because it's just more pigmented. So I don't really have to worry about brush strokes. It's so pigmented that even a very thin coat is pretty much opaque. And if you get a little bit of brush strokes, again, that's just like with putting the sealant over the other kind of tattoos. Slight brush strokes are okay because the MSC, when you spray over them, will level things just a bit. I mean, if you have really thick, heavily textured brush strokes, it's not going to be of any help, but like really slight brush strokes, it'll kind of fill those in for you. Just get a little bit of the water off my brush. It was a little bit too wet and it's taking off the layer underneath. So we're just going to kind of dab that back in there. And I want a little bit out, so I'm just going to kind of use my nail to clean that up. There. That's why you do the fill before, because it's really easy to clean up those edges with the black later. Now that my brush is nice and wet, I'm just kind of trying to smooth any areas that I can see a lot of texture going on. Alright, so you see how there's like a little bit of texture, but there's not like really obvious brush strokes going on there. The MSC will even that out quite a bit. So I'm going to let that dry. We'll do one more coat on there of very, very thin paint. And then it'll be done. This one just needs a little bit more in the middle. So do that. Okay, so you know this one is done. You got a nice even fill on it. There's no obvious brush strokes. So I'm going to set it aside. And I need to get this one dry so I can basically do the same thing and just with a really wet brush dab any little areas that just need to be filled. So I'm just blowing on it to get it drier faster. And wet the brush really well and then just kind of dab over the top. Alright, now since the arms are going to be in the way, one of the things I love about the Obitsu bodies, since I need to let the arms on both of these dolls sit to dry, I'm just going to pop their arms apart. which I managed to do just fine off camera. Well, I swear I did this earlier. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the arm off and put that over there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this doll. Oops, that time I popped her hand right out. Okay. And I'm going to set the arms off to the side so that they're out of the way, because they both have pieces on the body that need line work. Oh, I didn't quite get all the green off of this brush. This is my favorite brush, so I don't want to leave any paint on it. And I never like squeeze them if I can help it. I just kind of roll them dry. I find that it keeps the brushes intact longer that way. Okay. Now, let's see, this one has a nice fine tip. So I'm going to take another of my brushes here. And I'm going to do this little one just because it's small. So you get just a little bitty bead of paint on the end of the brush. You don't need it loaded up because you're trying to do small little line work here. And you just follow that sketched line. I probably should have just popped this arm off at the shoulder. Trying to get this line not quite so shaky, so that it actually looks tattooed and not drawn. Okay. Oops. Alright, I got just a little bit off of my line there. So, oh, I just stuck her foot in paint. Whoopsies. Alright, so I'm just going to take this and kind of scrape really lightly to try and pick that up. Okay. There. See, nice and clean. Okay, perfect. And I think the hardest part with doing them this way is just making them look like an actual tattoo and not a drawing, you know. Just want to thicken this line up a little bit. Because hers are a little bit chunkier. So that's kind of the style I was going with. Her is not quite so light and delicate, so I do want to thicken it up just a bit so that it looks cohesive with the rest of the art on her body. And now I'm just making sure my lines are still looking okay to me. And I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to leave it and let that dry and go back to the heart, which should also be dry now. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to do, oh, this is so much easier. I should have popped that off to do the fill too. Okay, now we're going to do the line work here. Actually, you know what? Let me grab a slightly thicker brush for this line work. I can always come back to the thinner one if I need to. But I'm gonna go with, yeah, go with this one. Let's try it anyway. Bodies you can pop apart really easily are definitely a help when you're painting your own tattoos, because it makes it much easier to maneuver. Please excuse this little bit of fluff in between two of the sticker tattoos. I have a rabbit who is shedding heavily right now. Her fur is everywhere. I'm going to have to do a very careful defuzzifying on these bodies before I seal them for the final time. Honestly, one of the keys here is just to keep as little paint on your brush as you can manage. It just helps keep everything cleaner, the less paint that's on the brush. Okay, I feel like that looks pretty good, so I'm going to leave that exactly as it is. Rinse my brush really quick. Even though it's going right back into the black, I do like to rinse them frequently. It just keeps them nicer for longer. I'm going to pop this back onto her elbow here. Okay. So that's essentially how you do painted tattoos. It is super duper easy. And I never like to use brush-on sealant on painted tattoos, just because the chances of like smearing them or taking any of the paint off, like accidentally lifting it off with your paintbrush when you're sealing, is just, it's too high for me. I don't like it. So I generally will seal with a spray sealant after I've done painted tattoos. I think that's it. I could keep painting on camera, but honestly, it's easier for me to do this off camera. So that's what I'm going to show you. And if you want to see the dolls when they're finished and assembled, I will be sealing them after I do this. I'm going to add blushing to the body, and then I will put a final seal on and assemble them, and they will be posted on my Instagram, which is currently Alter Ego Chris. I am debating on changing all of my social media over to Spooky Doll Lady just to keep it more cohesive. But for the moment, it's still Alter Ego Chris, so that's Chris, CHRISS. So you can find me over on Instagram if you want to see basically my documentation of the whole process, including when I put them together with their final looks. So, all right, thank you for watching. Bye!